Hello. I think most of you in this room know who I am. If you don't, my name is Becky Chilcott. I am a book designer by day, and we love the book design crowd. You are awesome. And if you're not a book designer, you're an extra special person to be here too, because it's just fantastic to be here with you. I volunteer at the St. Bride Foundation and help run these events. But tonight, I am doing the very behind the scenes bit, and the fantastic Jack Smyth, Nico Taylor and Ceara Elliot have curated a fantastic lineup for us this evening. And they have done so much work, speaker wrangling, getting slides to me on time, and just doing absolute magic. So thank you all for being here. It's really fantastic to have you here in the audience with us, online and in person. And I'm very delighted to be handing over to Nico Taylor. So thank you very much.
Hello, friends. How many people are online? Does it say?
Currently 37-ish, I think.
37. Hello, 37 online friends. Becky Chilcott, everyone. I think, let it not... Yeah, thank you. What she effectively said was that we email a few people and we turn up on the night, which is very little compared to the work that she does to organise all of these things. And let it be said, I think for the wider book design community as well, and the general graphic design community, the events at St. Bride's really are getting better and better throughout the years. We've got Jessica Hish, we've had Peter Saville, we've got Annie Atkins. These are quite incredible. So my wife's just texted me. He's gone to bed. That's good. So yes, they're incredible. And I think hats off to Becky for really spearheading a lot of that. And, isn't that incredible? I'm Nico Taylor. I'm one of the art directors of the Little Brown Book Group in the UK. And alongside Ceara Elliot here and Jack Smyth down here, welcome to I Love Your Work. So I think for a few of us, you might know who we are, but to those uninitiated, I think it's kind of important to give a bit of backstory here. Three of us used to work together at Little Brown about 8 years ago, and I think we were just kind of slightly bored and kind of maybe frustrated, and came up with this daft idea to kind of do a little zine of Killed Covers, just thinking it's really interesting to see the backstory behind the work that we do. Thanks to Becky Chilcott, that kind of little zine became a talk, and then we did another one, and we've done another one. We've basically done about 6 talks, all based around book design, all with kind of increasingly vague titles, but all seemingly very popular, which is quite incredible. So I think, what happens is every year we sit down and think, okay, what can we do this year? And what could be an interesting thing? What haven't we done before? Who haven't we had speak? Whereas this year we just spoke to John Gray and said, I think late one night and said, okay, we're going to do another talk. And he said, how about this for an idea? Let's talk about inspiration. So the credit for this talk really actually lies in John Gray's beautiful kind of arms. Because he said, wouldn't it be cool to sort of see, rather than people talking about their work, kind of have people talk about other people's work and see how that inspires them, to which we thought, that's bloody brilliant. I think an initial idea started as a kind of pass the parcel where one person could talk about another person's work and then they could come and talk, kind of hear that and talk about it again. But I think we suddenly realised that might kind of involve digging Alvin Lustig out of his grave and sort of getting him up here and saying who did you like, Alvin? It kind of very quickly became unfeasible. So that's when Jack and I and Ceara kind of put our heads together and thought, let's kind of curate this in a way that will work in London on one evening in kind of the start of October. So we have ahead of us a carefully kind of curated group of designers and illustrators working in-house, out-of-house, on commercial stuff, on literary stuff, basically hopefully covering the broad gamut of book design, sharing their work and their influences and the ways that it kind of ties into their kind of practice. So I think it's a good time to kind of appreciate the work that the speakers have done getting here tonight, because the brief they get from us is unbelievably vague. We say, here's a theme, don't talk about yourself too much, and you've got 5 to 10 minutes, but then we just let them run with it. And it's kind of credits to their kind of ingenuity and, sort of creativity that we're going to have a host of very, very interesting talks, I think. Before we get onto those, I think a final note, it's brilliant to see so many familiar faces here, but more so kind of lots of unfamiliar faces. And I think hopefully for those people, this might be their first book design talk or the first event at St. Bride's or the first time they've kind of seen these people in the same room as other people. Like, do not take this chance lightly. Like, go and say hello. I think we're all generally quite friendly. We will all buy each other drinks after at the pub. It's so nice that we get to kind of celebrate the work that we do, which is kind of effectively kind of come up with rectangles in different sizes, in very different ways, and with so many competing kind of restraints and all the rest of it, but to do it in a way that we can celebrate in a night like this, we should kind of all kind of put our hands together to celebrate. So I'm rambling now, so that's enough for me. Let's get down to it. Our first speaker of the night was shortlisted as a Designer of the Year at the Nibbies this year. She's a designer at Pan Macmillan. She's designed a ridiculously great number of covers in a very short amount of time. It's Moesha Paranwanyatwa.
Okay. Yeah? Okay. Thank you, everyone. Especially thank you to Nico, Jack, and Kira for inviting me to speak today. At first, I was really struggling to pinpoint what my inspiration was. As someone that looks to multiple sources of inspiration, from book covers, art galleries, and even wine bottles. But this person is someone that I always come around to in initial stages of research. I'm also glad that the theme allows me not to have to talk about my work a lot. Someone I really admire and love, I'm sure we're all familiar with, is Saul Bass. Although he might be considered a typical choice, I think this just speaks to how impactful his work is to design. A little bit about Saul Bass. He was an American graphic designer and filmmaker born in 1920 in New York. Bass carved a niche lane for himself in the realms of cinema and brand identity, with groundbreaking designs and visionary approach. He is perhaps best known for his iconic film title sequence, posters, and logos. He moved to Los Angeles in the late 1940s, where he started working on film ads. It wasn't long before his work caught the eye of prominent filmmakers such as Alfred Hitchcock and Stanley Kubrick. What I really love the most about Bass's work is his ability to distill complex ideas into minimal but powerful visual statements. I want to make beautiful things even if nobody cares. This is my favorite Bass quote because I think it just speaks to how I approach design. Firstly, he believed in only including the essentials. This meant color. He utilized a limited color palette to create strong visual impact. He selected colors that would invoke specific emotions or convey particular themes. Black being the most used color because he liked to make a strong contrast with the bright colors he used to pair it with. He often used contrast to draw the viewer's eye to the most important part of the design, whether it was the title or the graphic. Two examples of this is Vertigo and Bunny Lake is Missing. Vertigo only uses red, black, and white. The complex white graphic creates a sense of nausea and dizziness without having to chuck all the colors of the rainbow at it. On Bunny Lake is Missing, which is about a mother looking for her disappeared child, he only uses two colors. The use of negative black space around the figure of the child really stresses the danger surrounding the child. Bass even utilizes how dynamic you can be even with just one color. The black here is varied in tones where it slowly fades into the white, really emphasizing the disappeared child in the story. Less is more is a key to Bass's work, focusing on a few powerful elements placed within a carefully considered arrangement. By mindfully considering the placement and spacing of elements, he was able to convey complex themes and emotions. His posters weren't just ads for films, but works of art themselves. Although the Magnificent Seven poster was rejected, it is a stunning, simple design. Bass used 7 bold strokes to represent each member of the team. The graphic takes up most of the room of the cover, illustrating a grandiose adventure and bloody western. He made the movie title and director's name unimportant because everything you need to know is told cleverly through the punchy graphic. Making the ordinary extraordinary. Bass often employed everyday objects as metaphors to convey complex ideas or even emotions. His iconic poster for The Man with the Golden Arm features a jagged arm to represent the protagonist's struggle with drug addiction. A simple but profound use of imagery that communicates the essence of the film's narrative. I had felt for some time that audience involvement with the film should begin with its first frame. Another staple Baz is known for is him reinventing opening movie titles. Before him, films used graphic title stills that could be used for any other film, but Baz wanted the movie to take place at the very first frame of the movie, establishing mood and tone, which made each opening title unique to the particular film. I guess this is what book cover design is all about. It's about creating an introduction and sneak peek into the story of the novel. And a lot of movie opening titles from today use Bass as an inspiration. In his design for the film Anatomy of a Murder, Bass used the image of a dismembered body made of simple geometric shapes. This not only conveyed the theme of the movie, but also did so in a way that was both striking and immediately understandable. Learning about Bass has made me feel a lot better about how I approach design. It's rumored he made about 300 drafts for The Shining, and before concluding to this iconic poster, which is my favorite Bass poster. I haven't reached that limit yet, but I tend to do various rounds of visuals at all stages. Some people might see this as unnecessary and a waste of time, but I don't. This process makes sure I don't have regrets of I could have done this instead. In this, I try ideas that are exactly what the brief is asking, but also ideas that could push the brief a bit further. A lot of the time, the editors like me to bring a minimal amount of visuals to book covers, but I like to insist on bringing more, just so we can allow for a bigger discussion on how in cover meetings or what will best fit the market. This is specifically true for the design process of the center. Briefed as Get Out set in the mysterious language school, the center takes the reader on a journey through Pakistan, London, and India, integrating the sticky politics of language appropriation and translation. This novel had a fun premise that allowed my creativity to run wild. Initially, I sketched every single potential concept that I had in mind, which came to life in all these visuals, this being a selection of some of my visuals. I wanted to create a sense of creepiness and unsteadiness using the key elements in the novel, like language, repetition, food, and the center itself. And then these were the ones I presented in covers, eventually deciding on this as the final cover. What was challenging about this brief was how I was going to make ordinary thing like language look interesting, applying Bass's skill of turning the everyday into extraordinary. The mouth here is dark and seductive. The use of repetition and pattern creates rhythm and movement in this design. This made the mouth more dynamic, adding a layer of visual interest. With The Cat Who Caught a Killer, I was tasked to create a Richard Osman type of cover about a pensioner and a detective talking cat called Conrad. I was at a disadvantage because other people love cats on book covers. How was I going to make this stand out from the rest? But luckily, I had a punchy title. A lot of Bass's posters have punchy titles, so I did what he does. The goal was simplicity and clarity. I removed any other details and focused on the essentials. Here are a few examples of the early title workings from early in the process. I realized early in the project that I needed to have the title hand-rendered. The final cover was chosen because of its minimal color palette, but boldness. The cat and the title are both playful but sharp, blending into the market. The success of the first book allowed for the follow-up books in the series, which shows how I have taken this idea and made it feel unique whilst following the style. I have another one of these to design, but this is going to be tricky for me because I use all my good colors. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Moesha. I'm very happy to introduce our next speaker, who is freelance designer, illustrator, and art director, co-creator of the ABCDs, and one legendary book cover designer, John Gray.
Where is he? All right. Okay.
Let me fix it then.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, got you.
Great. I'm going to talk about this man's work today. Jamie Keenan. Where are you? Put your hand up. Nice. Yeah, you're ducking down. Good. Hiding. Okay, so this photograph actually obviously is fake. This was using the Hugh Grant shot, the mug shot, which I think was made in 1995. He was arrested in 1995, which I reckon is roughly when I met Jamie Keenan. So it kind of, what do you reckon? Is that about right? 95? Thank you, he's nodding. Good. Jamie and I both worked at Random House, and while we were there, he was making work like this. It was quite a daunting department. There was like some really good designers in that team, and I came in from like Secker and Warburg, and we were kind of, I don't know, I felt slightly not up to the challenge, I suppose. I wasn't sure about my work at that point, and this work was going on. I was like, oh shit, we're in trouble. Here we have like Rankin shot this. Jamie had a trip out and shot it with Rankin. As you can see from at the top there, the gazelles, sambas, which Jamie later made trendy again. This is the time that he took the sales and marketing department out for a photo shoot. I think the author went as well, and there was like alcohol involved. Anyway, publishing the old days. We're not here to talk about that. I could go down memory lane, but he's not dead. He's actually here. So I thought instead I'd like to talk about his work. Basically, like, Jamie to me is like it's important to love someone's work, but it's also important to hate someone's work. He's like that. It gives me fear. It like makes me feel slightly sick when Jamie produces work, because I know that my work is suddenly not as good as I thought it was, and I know that I need to up my game a bit. And I think that's really as important as a designer to have someone like that. And Jamie's always been like that, annoyingly. So I thought tonight I'd sort of break down why I find his work so annoying. Ideas. He's like an idea machine. It's like when I used to share a studio, like he'd come in not that early, I must admit, and he'd sort of like always produces this like little scrap of paper, and it's always like the back of an envelope or something, or a folded piece of A4, and it's like, what's that? And there's like little spidey doodles on it. And he's basically got his ideas ready before he's even come in. So he basically comes in and then just sits down and works through the ideas that he's had either in the night or like, you know, on his train on the way in, I'd be sat there like moving stuff round and round the cover, like hoping for some sort of magic that was going to happen, which it never fucking does it? While he would like steadily work through 5 ideas at least, and like at least 2 of them were pretty good. So I'm going to show this first. Like, this is the first piece of work that made me feel sick. This is like, Jamie's very good at like showing his work to you. So he'd say like, oh, can you just have a look at this? See what you think of this. And we were sharing a studio in Bethnal Green, and he said like, oh, can you just have a look at that? And I was like, oh, fuck. You know, when you're like, you've been working away on something thinking, oh, it's not very good. It's not very good. And then you see this, you're just like, that's it. I need to just go home. So he'd done this, and it's just, I don't know, it's just very simple and very humorous and clever, and I just like, it's just appealing, isn't it? And annoying. When we do talks together, Jamie always wants to take this slide out, and I'm always like, why do you want to take this out? And he's like, oh, it's old, I don't want to show it. I think like this is exactly why Jamie Keenan annoys the hell out of me, because like every other designer would have just done the front of the pill bottle. It would have just been that thing, you know. You would have just done, oh, just mock up a pill bottle. But Jamie saw the benefit of like twisting the viewpoint, of like coming up above, of like showing it. Yeah, and it's just like, it's just brilliant. It's simple and clean and brilliant. Bastard. I'm going to swear a lot through this. Sorry for people online. This, I think, like, I don't know. Again, you want me to take this slide out. I don't know why. It's, like, organically good. It's, like, I think it's the positioning of the figure. It's just, like, light. It's humorous. The little eye is just, like, I don't know. It's just really clever. Everything, like, with Jamie's work comes down to sort of, there's nothing superfluous. It's just like, it's just right, it feels. This is like a recent piece, and this is like, sums it up for me as well. I think like Jamie got into a discussion with the American designer Pablo Delcan, and it was like a fascinating, like if you haven't read it, look it up online. It's just like, it's really interesting, just hearing them both talk honestly about their process. And I think, like, Pablo's cover on the left, great. You know, it's a really strong piece of design. But it's also, it's like, and not to be rude, but I saw the roughs, I saw the process. This is like stop 1 on the bus of like, you know, you get off for ideas and you're like, oh yeah, piggy bank, yeah. Okay, I'll get off at the piggy bank stop 1, and I'll have a look around. And he'd done like lots of different pigs in the roughs. There were like some with like, put together, some smashed. Well, Jamie never gets off on the piggy bank stop. He always just thinks like, actually, I might just carry on this bus and see what else goes on. And you suddenly get this like elongated calculator that no one else, like I wouldn't have come up with that. And I think that's the problem, isn't it? I'm not very good at ideas. Anyway, moving on. A simple self-help book is like transformed just with like this sort of the clever repositioning of that subtitle. And then he fucking does this. You know, I was recently working on Nabokov for America for weeks, and like struggling through piles of cliche, didn't get anywhere, in the end got rejected. Nah, Kim's doing a great job. If you're here now. Anyway, this is just, I don't know what it is. It's like, it's just perfect. It's like, I was trying to sort of, like, I'd only just noticed that the type hits that diagonal perfectly from the left on the way in, and like the light, like reflecting on the ceiling. It's just like, it's just distilled sort of perfection and annoys the hell out of me. That was section 1. There are 5. Okay. You said 20 minutes, right? Okay. Vision, serendipity, lucky bastard. When we do these talks that we do, Jamie will often say, when I got the brief, like I was just like playing with a pen, and it's just like, you know, and I just wrote out the title and it was there and I knew what I was going to do. And it's like, it's Exley, it's a face, right? again, I've never really thought about it, but I was thinking, if I write down Exley on a piece of paper, I don't get a face. I don't think like X is an I. I don't think, oh, that could be, I'm struggling with two E's, trying to make like that work with like anyway, it's just, yeah. Metamorphosis, again, like, what can you say? He would say, like, look, it's great. The letters form the backbone down the middle of the beetle. Like, I wouldn't have seen that. I think my favourite thing about this is just like the little curls on the legs, just like perfectly they don't overstate the letters. It doesn't overmatch. It's just done in a way that it kind of like references it without nailing it home, I suppose. Perfect. Yeah, I wrote it out and there was just this little bit left over. Fuck off. All right, Dead Souls, right? Why didn't you get a J? Why didn't you get a Q? Struggled with the R though, didn't you? Struggled with the R. Yeah, this is just like, just like a bath, isn't it, for your eyes? It's just perfect. It's just like, I was thinking about, 5 letters, 5 letters, 5 letters, 5 letters, 5, how? Says Zadie Smith. Anyway, yeah. How does he get that? But then also, like, I was thinking it's a bit like, this is going to sound so pretentious, but I had it in my head. Like, it's like a sort of weird, when you strum a guitar and like the note is just like slightly imperfect. And I think this is what it is. It's almost like organic. Yeah, it's just like perfectly imperfect. There are like bits of shadow and things like that you just wouldn't have got if you'd done it in Photoshop. So it's beautiful. Okay, number 3, surprise. Like, Jamie's work will always surprise you, I think. It's just like you'll see something, you'll be like, that isn't what I would have done. That S doesn't work though, does it, Jamie? That S. If that bends the other way, doesn't it, Jamie, when you fold that down? Anyway, it's just like, it's the little things. It's the little things. Yeah. I just think his work is always constantly surprising. It's like I will always see something new. Like this is just so smart, and it's just like, I don't know, these two, I suppose, they've got a bit of a ta-da thing. I can almost hear like the trombone play when I look at it. Do you know what I mean? It's just like a flower bursting out or something. It's just like reached its perfect endpoint. It's perfect. The birds, I think for Nico, yeah, I just think like, who would have thought that would work? Like, yeah, it's still kind of like, I still can't believe it does. I think it's the and the and other stories that are like helping to make you visually make sense of that. Otherwise you might have just walked past it, but it's perfect. And this is just like a movie. Like you can feel it moving. It's beautiful. Yeah, it's like, yeah, so nice. Such a lovely series. Again, like movement. Boring, innit, looking at someone else's work. Great work. This is just bonkers. I just think and I just admire the fact that you stuck with it, really. It's just like, I remember you talking about it and like the days that it had taken you and like how they were going to reject it, but you managed to talk them round. And it's just like, I don't know, it's just incredibly well done. It's like, amazing you've got that figure still to like read, because by the time you've got like a lot of cotton going on there, that's hard. So beautiful. And this, yeah, there's a lot of work. So it's so good. Yeah. And then this, like the holy grail of like fucking book design, when you like get through something that is so not like a book, it's just like, this is the front, this shouldn't work. You shouldn't be able to get this through a meeting. Like, and when Keenan, the documentary, comes out, and I want to see like the raw footage of that cover meeting, because I just don't understand how, I know how visually challenged some people are in those meetings, they're not, can we make that type bigger? It's just incredible that you've managed to do that and that got printed and put into a bookshop. I still don't know how you did it. Okay, this is so annoying. He's so quick. Like, As I said, like, you know, quite often I would like be sat in the studio just like moving things left, moving things right, and then like going to lunch, coming back and starting again. And Jamie would just have like, you know, finished something like just like that. And it was just like, I think that's because he front loads everything, so it's the ideas are the key. It's like he's focusing on that first and foremost, and then working out how he's going to dress it afterwards. It's not like, you know, he's coming up with the idea as he goes along. He knows exactly what he's going to do, and then it's just about the execution. Yeah, so good. Ooh. They're so sort of clean and clever. Enough. Yeah, I think this is, yeah, like graphic genius, right? And that's me looking in at Jamie's idea shop. Yeah. Last one. Right, that should have got more of a laugh. Oh, sorry, wrong slide. That's from another talk. Jamie doesn't put a lot on social media. He doesn't really talk a lot about the work that he does. It just appears. It just it will appear on like a best of list or in a publisher's catalogue, and you'll think, oh, I wonder who did that, and it's like, oh fuck, yeah. So I mean, he is like, I think I think he's the only British designer who does work for New Directions. I think like we've all tried to get into work for New Directions. I think I did one, and they didn't ask me back. Yeah, so he's like working away in the States, and his work just like crops up on lists, and you're just like, oh, how frustrating. Yeah, this is like another sort of beautiful American thing. What I like about this is like the challenge of like trying to show a time in history without just like using boring stock imagery. He's like instead made something that all kind of pulls together, and are beautiful colours. Working on Percival Everett before Percival Everett was Percival Everett. And then going back like Penguin Classics, you know, just like a totally different way of looking at classics at the time. Yeah, just sort of revolutionary. And I think like, you know, fundamentally in the way that classics are designed now, actually. And then these kind of Routledge, beautiful pieces of Routledge work. I think like I'd love to like speak to someone about Routledge and to know how this kind of changed, or whether it changed the perception of like philosophy books. Whether this like, I feel like I saw these everywhere at the time. Like people were like, philosophy was suddenly accessible in shops, and I think like this must have done well for them. These just because I like them. I think this is your gran down in the corner. Yeah. Great picture of your gran. And then this series, like, which is just nuts, right? This is like insane. Like, and they got pulled, I think, quite quickly. But they're just like, I think at the time you said, I want to design something that looks like it's just landed from another planet. And they sort of do. They don't look like anything else. This sort of, you can't read the authors. They just look like, I don't know, just like nuts, don't they? I mean, I just love them anyway. And on top of that, he's like running ABCD, you know, which is like the amount of work that goes into that is insane. You know, he's like downloading all like 1,000+ entries. He's like writing back to the people who sent those entries saying you need to send it this size. You need to not like send your whole work folder. People actually send their whole work folder anyway. And it's a lot of stress, and he does it without complaint and for nothing. So, yeah. And apart from that, he did this. Bastard. Anyway, I'll leave you with a quote. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, John and Jamie. And please put your hands together for our next speaker, Deputy Art Director of Harper Fiction, Ellie Game.
that's me. Hello, everyone. When I was asked to talk about someone whose work I loved, there were dozens of cover designers I could have got up here and spoken about, and many of you are probably in the room tonight, and I didn't want you to think I was begging for a job, so sorry, I'm not speaking about you. But when I was thinking about the work that really inspires me, there was one designer, or more specifically, one piece of work that I come back to often for inspiration. And it is, in part, I think, a reason why I design books today. The designer is Rodrigo Corral. And I'll be honest, I'm not entirely sure if I'm saying his name correctly, but that's what I'm going to go with. For those who don't know his work, he's a book designer in the US. He's art director at FSG, creative director at New Directions Publishing, and also runs his own design studio. His covers are great. These are some of them. You probably recognize them. And I know the other cover designers in the room will be very used to seeing his work on briefs or hearing his name mentioned by authors as someone they want to work on their books. They're great. But the one piece of work that Rodrigo has done that I've been obsessed with for about 15 years is this book. It's called Influence, and it's by Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen. And when I told a friend what I was going to speak about tonight, she told me I might need to explain who Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen are for anyone younger than me in the room, which was quite an upsetting realization for me. But really, who they are and the content of the book is kind of irrelevant. Although in the context of the cover, it is probably helpful to know that it is two people, not three. They are twins, and that's why there's one on the front and one on the back. But yeah, the book is basically a series of interviews with designers, photographers, and models, along with snippets of the authors' lives. It was published by Penguin in 2008, and I borrowed it from the library probably around that time, and this was probably before I knew that graphic design was a thing. But I just remember loving the way this book looked and being obsessed with it and everything it contained. And I just thought it was so cool, so much so that I was basically still thinking about it 13 years later, and so I had to get myself a copy from eBay. This was a couple of years ago. And you know what? I still feel like it looks fresh today, and I still love it as much as I ever did. So looking back at it in preparation for giving this talk, I was basically trying to work out what it is that I love about it so much. And I realized it kind of hits all the things that I love in design. The main thing I think I love is that it's got this kind of great mix of typefaces, this really kind of heavy, retro, high contrast serif paired with a kind of typewriter typeface and loads of handwritten elements too. I love working with handwritten type in my work, so that's kind of something that I love to do. There's photography by Rankin scattered throughout it, which is great. And there's loads of kind of ephemera and lots of objects and things that I just treated in this really kind of nice, playful way, and it just softens the book and makes it kind of really pleasing and interesting to look at. And beyond that, there are just some really nice design choices. For example, I remember thinking the page numbers are kind of like halfway up the side of the page, and I remember thinking, as a 15-year-old or however old I was, that was the coolest thing. It's printed on two different stocks, I guess, just because they could. You know, it changes to this nice uncoated paper at the back, which is cool. Yeah, I just love the way it looks. I still do now. Rather than being a list at the back, the acknowledgements are a series of Polaroid pictures. And obviously there is one of the guy himself, Rodrigo, which is pretty cool. But yeah, it's really hard to convey the look and feel of a book through images on a slide. But obviously, I do have my copy here. So anyone in the room who wants to come and have a look at it at the end, you're welcome to come and flick through. But yeah, if I had to pinpoint where my love of book design comes from, I think this would probably be it. And although my obsession with the Olsen twins has faded somewhat over the years, my love for this book hasn't. So, yeah.
No, I won't. No. Thank you very much, Ellie. If you could put your hands together, please, for our next speaker, Dan Jackson, designer at Orion.
Hello. Ooh. I think I've gone slightly off-piste compared to those three, so bear with me. I like to think of inspiration and all these kind of little things that we take in and see every day as this agglomerated kind of scrapboard of knowledge, a pool of kind of little components being contrasted and complemented against one another. There's lots of great stuff in there. There's lots of random stuff in there. For cover designers, there's obviously a lot of book covers in there. For example, like randomly, I just love this cover and always come back to it. I think it's for its kind of brazenness, its slight absurdity, its clashing colors. For totally different reasons, I love this cover, which is so kind of chaotic and tactile, and you can see that it's actually been made. You can see where I'm going here. I also love this cover for how simple it is and how it utilizes the space. But what I'm trying to say is that taste, if that's what you want to call it, is sort of like our own filter, and I think it's intriguing to see what it latches onto and why we like what we like, if there is a reason. Often the first thing that influences the internal vision of a book cover is other book covers that you might see as comps on a brief. These were some of the comps I was given when designing the cover for Girls by Kirsty Capes, which published earlier this year. Girls follows the story of two sisters and the troubled relationship they had with their late artist mother, with art being a prominent topic in the book, and the title itself referring to a particular painting in the story, which the mother paints of her two daughters. It seemed clear that we wanted a bold commercial fiction jacket with a painting on, similar to this. The painting pictured on the left two designs here was one that really stood out to myself and the editor. It correlated really well with this fictional painting in the story, where it's described as the girls amongst swipes of orange and golden yellow tones. It had a really nostalgic feel, like it was a photograph from a family holiday or something, and a quirkiness, almost a weirdness, which I mean in the nicest way possible, that made it feel unique and endearing. I loved the flat golden ochre background, and I was kind of thinking of Josef Alber's square paintings when thinking of ways to frame it. In the book, the girls go on a road trip around the US, and this inspired me to try and inject a bit of Americana into the typography. I looked at a lot of Ed Ruscha's typographic paintings of gas stations and road signs for inspiration. In the end, I think one of the cover's best qualities is its simplicity, but I do hope some of those kind of influences and inspirations linger subtly. Another cover that I really love, which I think is just a great example of using a piece of art on a book cover, is this cover for Pure Colour designed by Na Kim a couple of years ago. It's so kind of like wonderfully minimal, I think. One almost pictures this kind of pool of green paint kind of spreading out over the white page, overlapping the title ever so slightly. The green shape is from a print by American hard edge and color field painter Ellsworth Kelly. And I love how the designer could have chosen to, create their own shape to achieve the same effect, and we would have been none the wiser, but instead chose to use Kelly's artwork and even left in the penciled in initials of the artist from the original print at the bottom of the jacket. Moving kind of swiftly on, The Lamb by Lucy Rose, which publishes next January, is a kind of tender coming of age story. It's about the relationship between a mother and a daughter that live out in the woods, kind of isolated, and they're also cannibals. I think as a cover designer, when you hear the word cannibal, your mind races to possibilities of shocking or kind of gruesome designs. These weren't kind of too over the top, but they were some of the initial ideas I had which weren't quite right for the book. After looking at one of the author's mood boards, actually, for the cover, I saw some paintings by Egon Schiele on there, which I thought could really aptly blend kind of the emotion of the book with some of the more horror elements. I looked for paintings he did of mothers and daughters and really loved kind of how they turned out, especially the darker one. But ultimately, we felt it needed to feel a little more approachable, a little more current, and perhaps slightly subtler. Fast forward ahead, and I'd found this photograph that we all thought worked really well, and looking at different type treatments, I was just thinking of ways to kind of hint at cannibalism. I then had this idea that I was quite proud of die cutting or perforating the jacket to reveal something underneath, like flesh. Whenever I think of die-cut holes in jackets, I think of this cover for Leave Cancelled, designed by Paul Rand in 1945. He requested that these holes be die-cut through the cover photograph as if it had been sprayed with bullets. This was supposedly the first time a trade book jacket had been die-cut, and publisher Alfred Knopp's wife called it an expensive extravagance. The idea was to have this kind of pristine white jacket with holes punctured through the cover, revealing this subcutaneous board underneath, which would have this meat texture printed on. And although everyone kind of liked the idea, we couldn't help but feel it only really worked when the book was in your hands. When viewed from far away or as a thumbnail on screen, there was no indication as to what these small red dots on the cover were. So while before we had looked more at kind of a more subtle approach, I ended up putting this meat strip, as we referred to it, kind of right there between the text. It kind of looks like a bacon rasher or something to me, but it definitely looks like meat. And in the end, I think kind of the brashness of this as a design element, compared with some of the softer elements of the design, like the photograph, make for a kind of striking juxtaposition. Alas, all was not lost with the die-cut idea, though, as that's going to be used for a special edition. I think we can arrive at final designs, and inspiration can be subtle, an influence which helped you along in your process, but not necessarily one that anyone could discern looking at the final design. Sometimes inspiration can be more kind of subconscious, like when you go to art exhibits and accidentally copy famous abstract artists without realizing. Sometimes our brains can just think of genuinely weird things to reference. Picture me in the art meeting saying, yeah, you know those optical illusions, the upside-down faces, you've seen those. I guess the point I'm trying to make is that the things we love and everything we take in kind of become a framework, a lens for how we view the world and how we create ideas. By seeing things and thinking about them, they almost sort of become part of us. And I hope this has been an interesting insight into some of my inspiration and work that I love. Thank you.
You can tell how tall Dan is compared to me. Sorry to interrupt. We've just been engaging in some really fantastic chat online, and I love involving our online audience as much as possible. And we've been sharing the love of some of our favourite designers online. So I just wanted to read out a few more names that everyone online has been just mentioning, because I think it's just really lovely to hear all the fantastic people that are inspiring everyone at the moment. And I have to have a disclaimer. There's too many people missing out. Don't be offended. These are just favourites this week. Everyone has been very, very adamant that it's too hard to choose. So in no particular order, these are just some of the fantastic designers out there inspiring people online today. So Holly MacDonald, David Fassett, Lydia Blagden, who happens to be online, and this made her day being chosen by someone else who didn't know she was online, Michaela Alcaino, Kishan Rajani, David Pearson, of course he's got to be in there, Janet Hansen, Henry Petrides, Helen Yentis, Ness Wood, Lisa Perrin, Christian Dior, love that one, and Renee Gruau, who I'm probably pronouncing their name terribly, but I just thought I would share those with you. And if any of you want to share some of your favourite covers online, do share them with us, tag us in, and we would love to hear what you think too. But anyway, back over to Jack.
I'm very happy to introduce our next speaker, Deputy Art Director of Transworld, Becky Kelly.
Okay, I am going to be glued to this piece of paper because I am quite nervous. Designers are not often in front of this many people. Oh, can you hear me now? Oh, you didn't hear any of that. Well, I was just telling you how nervous I am. So. Anyway, so as Jack mentioned, I'm recently just been made Deputy Art Director of Fiction at Transworld, which is a division of Penguin Random House, for those that don't know. And today, obviously, I'm going to be talking through various people and how they've inspired and helped shape my career, starting with my love of reading in the first place. As a child, I was a very avid reader, and I can honestly attribute this to the writing of Jacqueline Wilson, whose understanding of the often turbulent experience of being a young adult resonated deeply with me, and I'm sure many other millennials in this room. And recently, I had the absolute honour, privilege, and quite frankly, terrifying opportunity to design a cover for her first adult fiction book, which is a truly humbling experience and a significant full circle moment in my career that I'll cherish forever. And they say don't meet your heroes, but I'm delighted to report that she is just as charming as you would hope. But before entering publishing, I worked in the greetings card industry, something that I'm often told is like a film, 500 Days of Summer, which I've actually still never seen. My first in-house job there not only taught me the practicalities of product design, but it introduced me to many talented artists, designers, and illustrators along the way. It also exposed me to an industry where companies emphasize the importance of celebrating and crediting their creators, which I loved. Here are just some of the examples of the phenomenal artists I admire working in that world, and I'd encourage you to look beyond the traditional sources of a bookshop for inspiration, as trends often transcend our industries, and the greetings card world is such a rich resource, and hey, not too dissimilar, designing to a rectangle after all. Flitting back, though, to my university experience in Liverpool, which is a city I was drawn to because of its vibrant, creative and welcoming feel, but also, shamelessly, having grown up with the music of the Beatles, I had a bit of a fascination with living in the city that they formed in. This leads me nicely on to one of my biggest inspirations, spoiler alert, Sir Paul McCartney. And no, that's not because I'm a budding rock star, shocker, I know, but more that I'm motivated by his sheer creative output, his work ethic, and his range. I mean, obviously we all know Paul McCartney in some form, be it from the Beatles, Wings, or indeed his solo work. But if you really look at his accomplishments, it's just astounding. He's written nearly 700 songs, he's a multiple Grammy Award winner, he's received 2 honorary Lifetime Achievement Awards, and the list just goes on. But aside from these credentials, it's more when you read his books or listen to him speak about how he's still motivated to keep going and bettering himself, which is the main thing that I find truly exhilarating and most applicable to me as a person in the creative field. I'm in awe of his relentless drive to improve, and this documentary with Rick Rubin, who's also a really inspirational creative man, you just have to read any page from his book, The Creative Act, to feel truly seen as a creative. But anyway, this series entitled 321 is just a must-watch. It's so fascinating to see how they discuss and physically dissect his songs, turning off the bass, the guitar, and even the vocals, almost like layers on a Photoshop file that build up a complex design, which I think speaks to needing to trust the process and know that all those little parts will make up something truly great. He states in the documentary, and don't worry, I'm not going to do a Scouse accent, but he says, "I'm always wanting to do better in my music. I should be able to look back at my career and go, come on, Paul, that's enough. But there's still this little voice that goes, no, you could do better. That person over there is excelling. Try that, try harder." And it's this constant mentality of progression and determination that I just love. I like that he also embraces mistakes. For example, when he was out for a meal and somebody said, "Can you pass the salt and pepper?" He thought they'd said Sergeant Pepper, and thus inspired a groundbreaking album with an equally iconic album cover by Sir Peter Blake. McCartney is a man of many talents, songwriting being the obvious one, but he's also had a beautiful exhibition of all his early photography, which I went to see back in the summer, and the images were curated just so beautifully. He also can't read or write music, which is unbelievable, really, because it's all just in his head, proving that everyone is winging it to some degree, especially at the start. He self-proclaims to love leaving little accidents within his songs too, even when the record producers want to correct those imperfections. He liked to celebrate the inaccuracies and push the boundaries and go against the grain. Another principle I think we could all adopt more. I think it's fascinating, sorry, skipped a page there. I think it's fascinating to think, though, that even those that we look up to the most have people that have inspired them to start. As Paul often cites some of his biggest influences to be the likes of Mozart, Bach, Little Richard, Elvis, Fats Domino, and in literature, Shakespeare, Edward Lear, Oscar Wilde, Lewis Carroll. So you see, we are all inspired in some way or another by other creatives chipping into our subconscious or even conscious. Finally, my partner, who's a sculptor, keeps me engaged in the contemporary art scene, exposing me to many emerging talents in that world. I love attending gallery openings and private views to discover and experience art in person. I think seeing work in the flesh is so vital. It creates an emotional connection that online images just simply cannot replicate, which is one of the reasons that I'm so glad to work in this print-based industry where people still crave owning a physical, beautiful copy of a book. And these are just some of the examples of artists that I've discovered recently through going to private views, etc., across London. They're also different and dynamic, and I hope to commission one of them one day. But one piece of work that profoundly stayed with me and impacted me early on is this piece by Richard Wilson entitled 2050. It's a room filled halfway with recycled engine oil to create a perfect optical illusion of an impenetrable reflective surface. And I realise now that I'm contradicting myself by showing you pictures of it, as it simply just won't have the same impact here as me stood in that spot. But I thought it was a good example of how something can stay with you and how seeing something firsthand can leave a lasting impression on you. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Becky. Please put your hands together for our next speaker, designer at Penguin General, Josie Stavey Taylor.
Hello, I'm Josie. Here's my name in a stupider typeface than that. So I'm going to talk about what inspires me today, but first of all, I thought I'd start by talking about what I'm not going to say today, just to set some expectations. So when I was thinking about what I was going to say in this talk, I took a long, hard look at myself, and I realized that all of my inspirations were extremely boring. I studied illustration, so my route into book cover design was these very beautiful sort of hand-illustrated old book covers that I'm sure you guys have ripped off hundreds of times. And I thought you could probably just go home and imagine that talk for yourselves. I will not put you through the boredom of listening to me say how great these covers are. You already know it. And then thinking of designers that I love, probably most of the designers are gathered here today. Here's a photo I took of John Gray earlier. Completely unedited, just how he looks. So what am I going to talk about today? I think that the main thing that inspires me is deep dive research. I've taken a leaf of Richard's advice, and he said that that a good designer should interpret a brief rather than execute it. So instead of talking about people or things, I'm going to talk about how I love just opening 100 tabs, getting to every single part of Wikipedia, making a pilgrimage to the other side of London to see a museum, getting loads of leaflets, putting them out on my desk, thinking about crazy things that totally do not connect to the end of the project, but just getting really excited about the process. So I'm going to talk about two projects where I just became obsessed with research. This one is probably the most research I've ever done for a project, The Modern Fairies. It's set in the court of Versailles. It's about a group of aristocrats who tell gory fairy tales that sort of reflect the court dramas and intrigues going on in France at the time. and it was briefed quite loosely, but I thought I probably was going to make an illustration for it. And so I started looking really deeply into surface design, and particularly design of the time, sort of textile design. I didn't want to look too much at like printed things. I wanted to look more at objects. And maybe my eyes were a little bigger than my stomach, because I became obsessed with trying to commission this person I'd found on Etsy to make an embroidered bodice with the title illustrated on it and flowers all around it. Obviously, that didn't happen, but it was a brilliant idea while it lasted. And also, how could I talk about researching book covers without talking about our picture researcher, Alice, who always comes up with very useful things and came up with this gem for this cover. Why is this not the finished cover? I'm sad and angry that it didn't make it to the end. But so I also went to see this museum, the Wallace collection. I feel like sometimes getting stuck on Pinterest or on the internet like channels you into a little bit of a hole. So going into the real world and seeing real things is pretty nice. And I basically wanted this book to feel like walking into a room at the Wallace collection. I wanted it to feel shiny and gilded. And I became kind of obsessed with how the paintings on the walls of this room like looked very beautiful and soft and like pastel colored. But then you looked a little bit closer and you saw something dead or something a bit disturbing in the background. I thought that would be the right sort of approach for the book. So I did some little sketches, came up with some things that looked nice and patterned around the edge, but then you looked a bit closer and you saw a rat or like a pig's head, something kind of disgusting. And this is how it ended up looking. The idea of having these flowers flowing around the edge of the book, but then you realize, like when you look a little bit closer, that they're assembling the silhouette of a skull, almost like a Dutch kind of vanitas painting. But don't want to give you the impression that I'm a one-trick pony. Not only do I research things in the past, I can also do the present day. So this book is set in central Oslo. It's written by a child who was born in 2003, an adult, sorry, not a child. But it's an incredible book. It's written in sort of really short snippets, almost like prose poetry. And it's like super energetic. It's about a group of teenagers roaming around. They're like getting into bad scrapes, they're doing crimes. And I had thought for a while that I wanted to design something based on rave posters or like gig artwork, because I think they're like some of the most interesting pieces of design that you see out there. They're just like absolutely crazy. They sort of just channel the energy that you're going to experience when you go to the gig, rather than trying to like say anything specific, which I feel like is also maybe what a good book cover should do. And I thought the energy of this book and the sort of youth culture that is inside of it would match perfectly with like borrowing inspiration from these rave posters. Also, I bravely left the house again and went to the Tate Zine Fair, where I found all these zines that would absolutely never get printed on a like proper trade book, but had like really cool sort of text squished to about 80% width and crazy colors and things like that. So I wanted to borrow something from them. And also, I became obsessed with this guy, Braulio Amado. I didn't study graphic design, so sometimes I feel a bit scared that I don't know what the rules are, but I love how this guy just completely didn't care about the rules. He's squishing text, he's moving things outside of grids, he's making things wonky, he's using crazy colors, and it just looks like he's had the most fun designing it. And so I really wanted to just try something crazy like what he'd done. So these are the first set of visuals that I came up with, trying to make gradients that looked a bit like spray paint, using actual spray paint, trying to make things that sort of look like posters or album covers rather than book covers, squishing text up, making horrible lurid things. Obviously, the editors hated it. They thought it was horrible. They were like, who's going to buy this book? It looks busted. But so for the second round, we dialed it back a little bit. And Alice came up with some great picture research that told the story about youth culture without using the scary typefaces that wouldn't put off the older end of the market. And then here's where we ended up. This cover might not be quite approved yet. Don't tell anyone. But the one on the right, it's quite far from the rave posters that I started off with, but I think it does borrow inspiration from them, and it also is it attests to how nice it can be to have a journey. And I think sort of having the text in each bit of the corner, it does something that hopefully everyone will enjoy. So that's the end.
Thank you very much, Josie. I'm very happy to introduce our next speaker, illustrator, artist, and author, Rose Blake.
Hi everyone, I'm Rose Blake. Again, this is my name, but with my illustrations around it. I feel really out of my depth tonight because I'm not a book cover designer, and it's something that I really look up to. I have weirdly found myself in my practice going into doing a lot of children's picture books, and I often find that for the process of the book, you're kind of left alone. You get sent the text and then you can just go off and make your images. And then when it gets to the cover, it's just like every person jumps in and it becomes this kind of fight of everyone. And I don't know how you all do it, so well done. This is a cover that I was really pleased with, actually, because it was commissioned by an amazing art publisher called David's Werner Books, and I was working with a practice for everyday life for a graphic design studio that I really admire. And it just was for me, felt like a way of designing a cover that just worked in a very easy way. I was working with Kirsty Carter, and she just sent me the layer of text and I just put a drawing behind it, and it just seemed to kind of fit and feel right. And often, when I work in picture books, on the cover, it just really doesn't work like that. So I just wanted to show you something that I was quite pleased with. So tonight I'm going to be talking about David Hockney as the person that inspires me. Also, like the talks before, I found it really hard to kind of pinpoint one thing that I'm inspired by, because I feel like everyone, I'm just inspired by so much. But David Hockney, I thought this is quite a nice little story about a thing that kind of happened with me relating to David Hockney. So obviously David Hockney is an insanely amazing painter and artist, and I think he's an incredible designer as well. These are kind of, for me, bits of design that I love of his. I feel like in every piece of David Hockney's work, it just has his soul in it. It's he uses all different mediums, uses all different kind of techniques, but it always just has this kind of absolute Hockney feel. And it has this playfulness, and it has rigor, and it has observing the world. It's just full of soul and a beautifulness. And he just doesn't give a fuck about what anyone else thinks. It's I'm going to make this, and this is what I'm going to make. So I'm obsessed with him. And basically, my dad designed that album cover that was shown, the Sgt. Pepper one, the Beatles one. So he and David Hockney are mates. And I went on this holiday when I was 10, and we stayed in David Hockney's beach house. So apologies for the Nepo baby vibe of this. It's quite awful, but hopefully it tells quite a nice story. So I made a little book. I wrote a memoir about my relationship with my dad that came out 2 years ago, and I wrote this little piece about this drive that we went on when I stayed in LA. So I'll read it to you quickly. Apologies. We're going to LA for 2 weeks holiday, Disneyland, Tootsie Rolls, huge pizzas, and David Hockney has offered to let us stay in his guest house on Pacific Coast Highway. I'm 11 and enjoying my last weeks of freedom before starting at a stuffy all-girls school in September. I'm a serious but mischievous tomboy with a short mop-top haircut, obsessed with rollerblading, The Simpsons, Tamagotchis, and Backstreet Boys. All I really want is a Nintendo 64 with 2 controllers. I'm definitely not ready for big school. On the first morning in California, I eat Pop-Tarts for breakfast and watch seals bobbing up and down in the ocean in front of the living room window. The flowery wallpaper in the guest house is hand-drawn by Hockney himself. In my bedroom, he has painted a section of his road to Malibu directly onto the wall and hung a real frame over it. I draw a wobbly picture of it in my notebook. Hockney had promised to take us on one of his musical drives around Los Angeles, a choreographed tour through the mountains set to music and timed with the sunset. We get a cab up to his house in Laurel Canyon and are let in through a tiny gate into a tropical wonderland. The house is painted in primary colours and there are giant succulents everywhere. It is scorching hot and light seems to bounce off every surface. The bottom of his pool is painted to look like one of his water pictures. Oh, sorry. We are late to arrive and Hockney is slightly panicked as the drive relies on precision timing. You can't be late because nature is doing the lighting, he says. So we turn around and walk straight to his car and promise I can have a swim when we get back. The brown leather seats of the Lexus stick to the back of my legs. Hockney and Dad sit in the front, me and Mum in the back. There is a strong smell of smoke from Hockney's never-ending cigarette, his soft northern drawl, and the classical music booming from the car stereo are strange and exotic. At home, my parents listen to rock and roll. As we reach the top of the canyon, the sun sets and the music crescendos, I realise this drive is about being alive. It is about light, landscape, colour, music, and above all, the pleasure of really looking at the world. At this moment, big school doesn't matter at all. So that's me at the age of that drive. So that is the house, basically, that we stayed in. I was also a massive Paul McCartney fan, so that hence the haircut. And it's so crazy. So, like, that painting on the wall, when we were shown around the house, my mum went in and was like, wow, he's really, like, must be really, you know, easygoing, like letting people, he let anyone that he knew stay in this house, like letting people stay in the house. And the guy that was showing us around just took the frame off the wall and was like, oh, he's just painted it directly on the wall so you can't nick it. So, and also that you can see like the patterned wallpaper as well is just directly painted. And I think the house was sold like a few years after we stayed there. So the person that bought it, I just pray kept it. I really hope it wasn't like a shitty LA property developer. So this was like, as I read in that thing, I was like quite confused at this age and like not really understanding how it was to be in the world. But I also hated drawing as a kid because both my parents are artists and like it was such a pressure on me to like make a beautiful drawing of a dog like they could, and I would draw a dog and it would look like cross-eyed and with 5 legs. It just was never a pleasurable thing. But I would like, I don't know, I did still do it, and that was the drawing I made of the painting of his, which I still have and is quite a meaningful thing to me. So yeah, I feel like David Hockney just like embodies this idea of being an artist and illustrator and creative person that just like is who he is. So his work is a part of his life and his style is part of his work, and like that salami is part of it all. Like it just all works so well. So I basically, after that thing happened on that drive, I feel like I never saw him again. It was like this kind of very like exquisite, crazy moment. And then that was that. It was like the end of that thing. So here are some more. And he also loves dogs. He's just amazing. So I got contacted by the Tate publishing company, and they do this series called Meet the Artist. It's a children's series, and they basically make like an activity book based on different artists. And they were doing a Hockney one. And so I just got an email through being like, oh, we're doing this Meet the Artist, David Hockney, would you be up for doing it? And obviously for me, that is just like the dream commission of all time. It's Tate Publishing, so there's like no budget. We had like 5 weeks to do it. And it was all very kind of a quick turnaround thing. But I said yes. So I, as you all probably do, I just like will highly research a project before getting started. So I listen to like every podcast that there is. I try and get all the books together and just kind of get involved in trying to feel it before I start the project. So Hockney basically had to, approve the illustrator. And I don't think he kind of would have ever remembered that drive when I was 10. I hope not, basically. I hope he saw the images and enjoyed them. So we came up with this idea of like illustrating his name using his imagery. So I kind of had this amazing experience of like going through his back catalogue and trying to like pinpoint things that would work as a letter. So I really was pleased with like the water coming up as the V. That's the one for me that really works. I suppose that's like the quietest one out of all of them. But anyway, they sent it to him and he liked it. So we got to do the project. So these are just a few kind of spreads without the text put in. But it was just like a dreamy experience for me. And he has these two, or had these two Dachshunds, so I could use them as like a kind of a way to explain things to children, like explain ideas that I suppose are a bit more complicated. And then that happened, and then I got contacted by Thames and Hudson like a year or two later. They'd seen this book, they'd seen the Tate one, and they said, oh, we're doing a children's version of an adult book that David Hockney and Martin Gayford had written. This cover, I mean, I'm embarrassed by this cover being in a room with all of you lot. And it just took so long, this cover. It was like 50 rounds of back and forth, and it ended up with me like taking my Cintiq tablet, which is this big, into the office of Thames and Hudson, and like having a meeting with the boss whilst eating a baguette, like pleading with her to kind of, I don't know, it just was awful. But it kind of works, I don't know. So this was another project for me that was just like crazy, like illustrating his words. So we did it, and it was for me like a really fun thing. And then, so I, again, in this period of my life, was just like confused about stuff. And a friend of mine had a birthday party. It was at the not nightclub, the bowling alley Rowan's in Finsbury Park. And so we had to like eat pizza and do bowling and drink these big cocktails in jugs. And I was just feeling so like, oh, fuck this. I don't know, I just didn't really want to, I wasn't in the mood to be there. And I just got my phone out and was like looking through emails that are all from like Matches Fashion or whatever, like not interesting emails. And then this email that just said from DH, and it was no subject. And I opened it, and that's what it said. So that just like made my day. And it kind of shows that you can just be in Rowan's having like the shittest night of your life, and then you get a really nice email from David Hockney. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rose. And now to introduce our last speaker of the evening, freelance designer and creator and host of the Cover Meeting podcast, Steve Laird.
Is that about right? Sorry, lanky lid. Sorry. Hey, everyone. I love The Chase. And for those who don't know, The Chase are a ideas-focused design agency founded in Manchester in 1986 by Ben Casey and Lionel Hatch. But for me, the thing which really grabbed me about The Chase was the ideas focus of their work. And that's something that really struck a chord. I think I wouldn't have comprehended it at the time, but I think I've always been interested in ideas and concepts, even at a young age. And before I kind of get to The Chase, I guess before The Chase and before book covers came album covers. And I'm always one to kind of look back on where creativity comes from. I think I've always been a little bit in my own head, probably because I'm an only child. But this album cover kind of always struck a chord with me. And I just remember one particular occasion, me and my friends really liked Korn. And I remember being in school one day, I think I was about 14. And I was just sat with my mate, Pete Jenkins, and I just said, oh, Pete, I really like the way the letter K kind of comes down and it looks like it's hanging the girl. And he just kind of like turned to me with a very kind of freaked out look on his face and just said, what the fuck are you on about? I think it was like the first moment where I realized that my friends weren't kind of particularly interested in these kind of things and weren't thinking the same kind of things and weren't noticing these kind of things or caring either. And I think it's just always stuck with me as that was the kind of the first moment where I realized that maybe I thought a little bit differently to look at my peers, I suppose. So I knew from an early age I kind of wanted to pursue something with ideas and creativity. And then in my first year at uni, we went to something called the Four Designers Conference. We went there quite early on in the course. I don't think it exists anymore, but basically 4 designers are there and they give a talk. You kind of, it's all, the name's on the title really. And The Chase were there, and it was the first time I'd ever heard of their work, and they blew me away because I think they the way they worked and the way they explained how they worked just kind of summed up everything that I kind of thought could be in me, I suppose. This was the first piece of work of theirs that I saw. It's an identity for a housing association called Leaf Street, and it just blew me away that they could kind of take these two separate words and just merge them into this one thing. And it's a logo that I just always come back to because I think it's just so simple and it's just so bang on perfect. I just think you can't beat it. And the Chase have done so many identities like this. I could stand up here for an hour and just kind of ream off one after the other. And you almost don't need to describe it. It just says what it is, which is what I really love about it. And back in the day, they used to have quite a simple website. And instead of kind of going into loads about their process, they just had this simple proverb. And there was an old Indian craftsman who carved beautiful little elephants from unpromising blocks of timber. Asked how he did it, he simply replied, "I just cut away the wood that doesn't look like an elephant." And it perfectly kind of symbolizes the way they work and everything that kind of goes through their studio. And I think from that moment on, it was the kind of work that I knew I wanted to do. So like identities like this, they did this identity for a company called Lazy Beds. And it's just so painfully simple. They've just taken an uppercase L and just flipped on its side. It's so perfect. But also for me is how did they get this approved? It's so hard to get things like this approved. And it's just, I don't know, so much of their work is like this, and it's just genius. This is another recent one of theirs. It's for a company called Chain House Brewing, and it's just this again. It's this merging of two things into one thing. It's so annoyingly good, and that kind of rolls out and allows them to carry it through into the rest of the brand. It's just. And then to bring it back to book design, the Chase created this book about coastal erosion, which not only has really sympathetic photography, but when you scroll through the book, a section of the book is cut away, so as you go through, the book is literally eroding. And it's just such a beautiful thing, and I think it really justifies it being a book in the first place. And I love it when books have that element to it, where it just justifies it being a physical object in your hand and just elevates it so highly. So I think for me, kind of what I took from the Chase throughout university was, everything should be ideas-based and have a simplicity to it and ultimately a graphic wit to it. At the end of uni, we went to D&AD New Blood, which I'm sure many of you did as well, and you got to exhibit your final year's work. And as part of that, there was an opportunity to sign yourself up to portfolio, kind of a crit with the different professional industries. And the Chase were there, so I signed myself up to have my portfolio reviewed by the Chase. I'm not quite sure what I was expecting. I think when I was coming out of university, I'd done fairly well. The confidence was high. And I don't know if I expected them just to kind of roll out a red carpet and hire me on the spot. But suffice to say, the designer absolutely destroyed my portfolio. And it's just funny that I kind of had these two experiences from the Chase that bookended my university career. And I think I was quite despondent after that. I still kind of remember it quite vividly. But after a couple of days, I just realized that everything that designer had said was completely constructive, and he was right. And I think for me, it was like a really humbling experience of I've come out of university and this is the level that some people are operating at, and that's where you've got to try and get to potentially. Another humbling experience. I don't know if anyone else had that thing when they graduated, you thought you might just set up a design agency straight off the bat. When me and my friend Ed on my course, we got a couple of jobs from our end of year show, and so we worked on them together, and so we decided we should form a design agency, and for some reason we called it Egg and Spoon. I'm not quite sure why. I think egg sounded like Ed, and I think he said I looked a bit like a spoon, but I think that was about as rational as it got. But I remember we, carefully crafted some nice handmade business cards with lovely kerned Helvetica, And but at exactly the same time, a couple of designers from the Chase had splintered off and just set up their own design agency called Thoughtful. And then they designed an identity for a company called Egg and Spoon and came up with that, which is just so painfully good. And suffice to say, that was the end of Egg and Spoon Design Limited. So I worked in branding for about 5-6 years, and then kind of pivoted to publishing and book cover design. It was something I always wanted to work in. And I guess when you kind of open yourselves up to kind of a philosophy of work, you tend to notice it in other places as well. And book covers which had that simplicity and that kind of clear idea, it always stood out to me. So like this cover by John, I don't know if it's just me. It's got that kind of Chase element to it. It's just so perfect. It's just so simple. You don't need anything else. You don't need to complicate it. It's already been spoken about, but yeah, Jamie's genius. Again, done in a completely different way, with photographs, but again, just so amazing. And then David, who I probably could have done a talk on just for his own, all about David really. But I mean, this is when I first started in publishing. I think he was kind of riding a wave with great ideas, and this is probably my favourite ever book cover, where it just it's the work of art in the age of mechanical reproduction. It just repeats the spine, and I just love covers like this where it looks like it hasn't been designed. It's almost like it's designed itself, and I just think it's so powerful when that happens, and it's not going to happen very often, but when you see a cover that works like that, it's beautiful. So I knew coming into publishing that it was an opportunity potentially to kind of do this kind of chase work where you could kind of merge two things visually. I thought it could work quite well in book publishing, and particularly non-fiction books as well, which is what I work on most, although I am open to fiction covers, just shout out. And I think the first time I'd managed to get a cover approved where I did that was, this book's about DNA and understanding our genes. There's a long, convoluted story why it's called Herding Hemingway's Cats. I won't bore you with it now. Suffice to say, I wanted to merge DNA and genes and cats. And for me, it was the first time I ever kind of successfully got something approved. And it gave me quite a lot of confidence to kind of try this more. And sent me up for my kind of freelance journey after leaving Bloomsbury. This is another cover where I just kind of used that kind of known visual language, I suppose, from IKEA to kind of make you understand what this book's about kind of instantly, about how Sweden works and what we can learn from it. And then another cover I worked on, Julian Humphreys got me to design this cover, the status game, which is quite a hard thing to quantify status, to visualize that. And I think we all kind of know the kind of default look of a non-fiction book. You kind of have a big title, a subtitle, the author, some kind of supporting statement about the author, pointless quote at the top. And then I thought, can I play with this and kind of flip it? So instead of this book's basically about how status is intrinsic to everything we do. It's the most important thing about ourselves. So I thought, could I flip the hierarchy? And so that the cover became this. So the title and the subtitle become really small, and then the best-selling author thing becomes really big to highlight that. I thought I'd just leave on one last job by the Chase. Ben Casey is a big Preston North End fan. And he got to rebrand the whole club, and the identity itself is quite simple. It's really hard to mess with club badges and things like that, and people get really angry. But underneath that, there was like opportunities for them to kind of show their wit. So like you've got the compliment slips, you've got players swapping shirts. And it's just a really nice touch, and they've emulated the identity with the same kind of style of illustration. And you've got like yellow cards for when you send an invoice, and then a red card when it's like a late payment. I think we should need something like that in publishing, don't we? And then even like the toilet signage is kind of not left uncut. It's just something which a lot of people would just not even think about, but then they kind of go the extra mile and use some like really nice kind of old photography of the Preston ladies team. and then the baby changing song as well. It's just really nice. And they also got to kind of impact the look and feel of the stadium inside. And this always stuck with me, and I thought I'd like to try something like that one day. They kind of used the seats almost like pixels to create these portraits of iconic Preston players. And then a couple of months ago, I was bored, just having a play, and just started coming up with these little illustrations of these football players in pixels. And I've been meaning to teach myself animation for about 20 years, kind of missed Flash, and then I've paying for After Effects, so I thought I may as well teach myself bloody After Effects. So I've been kind of teaching myself After Effects based on these little football players recently. It's completely unrelated to work. But I've kind of ended up starting a YouTube channel, and it's just kind of snowballing. Anyway, thanks. But yeah, look for the Worth of the Chase, they're amazing.
That's brilliant, isn't it? Thank you, Steve. Great designer, podcast host, and now influencer. You need to share that link with us. That's us done. Thank you so much to, primarily all the speakers, because, none of us get paid to do this. Every penny that you spend at the bar on a ticket goes towards supporting this wonderful foundation. So massive hats off to all the speakers. Primarily, we're going to go to the pub now. Please buy them a drink or many. I think what's really heartening about the whole thing is obviously the whole sort of sense of sharing for inspiration is sort of both massively motivating and also infinitely infuriating. Sort of it's that beautiful feeling of being really kind of pissed off when someone does some great work, because you kind of feel you just want to kind of go home and sit behind the computer or go and see a gallery or whatever else. And I think that is the massively powerful motivator that we have in this industry. Anyway, enough of me. Any more to say from the online crowd?
Yes, thank you. It's been fantastic. And sorry. I think we have to thank Nico, Jack, and Ceara again. A huge round of applause, and for the speakers as well. So.
Becky says, which pub? We're going to go to the Old Bell on Fleet Street and kind of try and crowd out a load of city boys. So see you all there in about 10 minutes, hopefully. Thank you so much.